Okay, so good morning and good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our second FinTech Friday session. My name is Karila Kilian, and I'm pleased to be moderating the event. In October 2020, the Alliance published its first FinTech research, How FinTechs Can Profit from the Multi-Trillion-Dollar Female Economy, which highlighted the need for capacity building and networking to better understand the female economy and how to serve it. It also highlighted FinTech's need to connect with financial institutions, big techs, and unicorns. And so FinTech Fridays is born. It's a monthly thought leadership meetup between FinTechs, financial service providers, and big techs, unicorns, investors, all working to drive the female economy and unlock its full potential. It answers the main needs identified by FinTechs. First, for capacity building, to help participants get insights on how to build a gender-intelligent business model with experts from FinTechs and women market leaders from around the globe. Second, to help FinTechs network with experts, financial institutions, and ecosystem players to build connections and open new market opportunities. We have a very exciting program lined up for you today, and we hope that you will find it most valuable and will engage with our speakers. Before we start, just a couple of housekeeping notes that I'd like to highlight. So keep your microphones and videos, microphones on mute and videos off, except if you're the speaker. Use the chat function to engage and ask questions to our panelists, and please rename yourselves to make sure that your name and your institution name appear clearly to make the networking much easier. So with us today, we have a panel of experts from FinTechs all over the world to discuss the importance of using sex-disaggregated data to drive decision-making. Our research last year found that while FinTechs are well-placed to tap into the women's market, they are largely overlooking it. A big driver is that they are unaware that there is a women's market with distinct needs and preferences, and there is a drive to build the biggest business the fastest possible without taking the time to look into segments. FinTechs that track their KPIs by sex, however, report a strong business case for serving the women's market. 64% of the FinTechs that collect and use sex-disaggregated usage data found that female customers have similar or higher usage rates than men, and on average, they reported a CAC to LTV of 1 to 3. Most FinTechs do not use, I'm sorry, I just have to mute, we have interference. Sorry about that. If you can all please mute yourselves, thank you. Okay, so as I was saying, so most FinTechs do not use sex-disaggregated data to inform decisions at any stage in their business lifecycle. Most do not disaggregate TAM by sex. Instead, they focus on serving early adopters to grow their base as quickly as possible and capture investor interest. And because men are perceived to be early adopters, FinTechs often begin to tailor their products to men. And by the time they are well-funded, they are caught in a self-reinforcing spiral of catering primarily to, well, the male user. And on one hand, this leads to biased data points that are not fully representative, and algorithms built on these data points will lead to biases against women. On the other hand, this leads to FinTechs not sex-disaggregating the types of data that are key to making gender-intelligent business decisions, such as CAC, customer acquisition cost, usage, LTV, client satisfaction, or even engagement data points such as Net Promoter Score and other metrics. And so the objective of this session today is to highlight the need for FinTechs to prioritize the collection of sex-disaggregated data, both external market and internal customer data, in order to capitalize on the full business opportunity of the women's market. Now, I now want to turn to my panel of industry experts as we do a deep dive on this topic and hear their best practices and insights on capturing and analyzing sex-disaggregated data and overcoming roadblocks along the way. So first, I'd like to do a quick round of introductions. I will ask my speakers to please introduce yourselves and the companies you represent in 1 minute in the order of the pictures. That would make it much easier for all of us. And then we can start the discussion. Dietmar, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Carol. I'm Dietmar Baumer. I look after data and analytics at Time. Time is a digital bank. We've got our first deployment in South Africa, where we launched just over 2 years ago, where we were the first digital bank to launch in South Africa. We were also the first institution to get a full bank license in over 20 years. And when we and since launch, we've so far onboarded about 3.3 million transactional banking customers. So yeah, so very happy and excited about how the market has perceived our offering, and look forward to engaging further on this topic.
Thank you. Rizwan?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Nice to be here. My name is Muhammad Rizwan. Call me Rizwan. I'm the country director for World Remit in Malaysia. I'm also the head of ASEAN business. I definitely being part of the founding team for World Remit in London, back with Ismail and also with the date Catherine Wines. We have been growing actually rapidly from London to now as far as Mexico and Australia in terms of covering the globe. We exist in more than 55 countries and can stand almost on any country on the face of the earth. So happy to be here and to share what we do at World Remit. Thank you.
Thank you. Preeti?
Hi, everyone. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on this platform. I have been part of financial services for almost 2 decades now. My parent company, Underwriting, is one of the leading financial services firm in India. What that gave me an opportunity to do was, really step down from not just the tier 1, but the tier 2, tier 3 cities where we have presence and meet customers. And I think that's where that deep insight of women being the underserved category in the space of at least the investment piece led me to start Lakshmi, which I'm the founder of. Lakshmi is a fintech which caters, it's a financial platform only for women. So I think on this platform, I would probably not add value to say, how do you, sort of look at data separately as men and women, but I could give you insight into how do you look into a data of just only women and say, what are women doing? So yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Preeti. And Sucharita?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here in this awesome group. Really excited about this discussion. And Carol, thank you for convening this. Kaleidofin, is a new bank for the informal sector. We're also focused on women customers. I founded Kaleidofin about 3.5 years ago. And we are focused on informal sector customers actually in remote rural as well as semi-urban areas where financial planning and wealth management are largely missing. We believe in good tailored financial solutions so that customers can really meet their life goals. Yes, really looking forward to this conversation.
Perfect. Thank you all. Now I'm going to stop sharing the presentation because I would actually like to spotlight my speakers. And there we go. This way we will see all of them while they speak. So Dietmar, I'm going to start with you because, well, I mean, you are the data person by excellence. So I'm sure you agree that data is critical. Let me just 1 second. I forgot to spotlight you. I'm going to remove my own spotlight. That way we have all the speakers appearing. Okay. So I'm sure you agree that data is critical for decision-making and product development. And 53% of times customers today are women in a country like South Africa, where I don't think that's representative of the population that actually have access to a formal account. And your NPS score for female customers is at an incredible 69. So why are you doing so well with women customers, and what other metrics shed the light on the business case for targeting women?
Thank you. Yeah, as you rightfully said, we've done really well in terms of attracting business from women, and they generally seem to be very, very happy with the service and the product offering that they're getting. And there's a couple of components to that is really important. And the first one is obviously even before you launch and before you even have your own data is to make sure you do proper market research and you're aware of the trends in market, that you also know that once you start getting data on your own platform, how does that relate to industry standards? Is that in line, or is it above, or is it below? So to put that in context, when we launched the bank in South Africa, completely new entity, new to the banking environment. As I mentioned, we're the first institution to get a new banking license in over 20 years. All our competitors were well established. Most of them were actually over 100 years old, with only one being sort of 25 years old. So there's obviously a big trust factor already in the existing banking sector. And when you launch a new bank, it's obviously quite a process to get your brand established and the like. So too, as you highlighted in your introductions, initially, first couple of months, that's not what we saw. We saw quite a big skew towards men. We started off in the first 6 months probably having about 60% of the users on our platform being male, and only 40% female. But being aware of the fact that yes, men are bigger risk takers. They do tend to, as you said, be more likely to be an early adopter. Just being aware of that obviously is quite important, that if you do track this information from the start, that you don't necessarily sort of just overreact on some of the initial trends that you see. But then when you look at our offering and maybe just to highlight why it's worked so well in the female industry and what has really been appealing is, one thing that's obviously also well known is that women are time poor and they don't have, time is a much scarcer commodity for women than what it is for men. So the way that we've set up our banking infrastructure is that we're quite tightly integrated into a retail environment. So yes, we're a digital bank, but we've got a physical footprint with kiosks where customer can go through a digital sort of assisted process where there's a physical environment, and those are based within retail stores and within a retail environment. And we've also integrated within those retail stores. So it's one of the biggest grocery chains in South Africa. And we've also integrated into their till points that you can do cash in and cash out. So you can deposit funds at a till point, and you can withdraw cash at a till point. So the fact that we located and they can do two things in one location, so they can do the banking as well as the shopping in one location, has proven really appealing and effective. And for women, the fact that they don't have to go to another bank branch, go and stand in another queue, has really worked well, specifically just from a positioning and where we've located ourselves. And then after that is obviously you need to stay very close to the information. So once you've done your pre-market research, where we had a lot of case studies and focus groups and people that we've interviewed before, and then once the real data now starts coming through, how does that relate, and is it in line with what your expectation was? So keep on tracking it and staying close to that is important. But before you launch and before you roll out, it's quite important to know sort of what the markers are, what the trends are, what the behaviors are, that firstly, when you see data, you can see it in context and know how to interpret it, but also when you roll out your product, that it does speak to and address a specific need that is out there.
And I think that's a great point you're making, Dietmar, because had you only based your understanding on the analysis of the data from your first couple of months of activity, you would have had a complete different set of services and structure today. Whereas given what you know on the data from the market research, you were able to adapt because you knew that the data you were getting already was biased because of specific, exactly. And so I think that exactly is the essence of what we're talking about today, is that you really need to understand and you really need to work based on that understanding, and you need to analyze the data. I mean, that's the whole purpose, right? You have to analyze that data to be able to make those informed decisions.
And question the data. So don't just look at the trend and take the trend at face value and react to the trend that you see in front of you.
Exactly. Question the data. That's, I think, is the quote of the century, right? I mean, data is today the most sought after more than natural resources, right? It's the most sought after treasure by everyone, and really questioning that data is critical. And so how are the data points that time used for decision making before the launch? I mean, you almost in a way, touched upon this versus those used now, especially particularly when it comes to understanding customer behavior by sex or other demographics as well.
Yeah. So we used a lot of focus groups. So where we got people into a specific location, into our offices. Obviously, 5 years ago, the world looked very different than it does today. So you could actually get people together in one location and do these focus groups. But actually having sort of working prototypes of what you're planning to roll out, getting people from the community in, having them test it out, play it, pull it apart, and even don't ask questions, just record the session and see how they engage with it, what their reactions are, versus more formalized sessions that we had. We asked them specific tasks or specific experiences and questionnaires that you did, as well as we just almost did like a mystery shopping experience where we went to the shopping malls and the shopping areas where we knew we were going to put physical locations in. Having people there with sort of a clipboard questionnaire, just talk to people and really understand what their needs are and what they're looking for and what their pain points are today. In those locations is important, but then also bringing people in. Once you have a prototype, it's not a working prototype that it's actually linked to your core banking system or working, but it's just the actual user interface, the user experience, just exposing people to that as soon as you can, as quickly as you can, and then you start getting their feedback even before you in market is quite important.
Great, thank you, Dietmar. So moving on to Rizwan. Women represent 48% of global migrants, and according to your website, migrants are the main senders of remittances worldwide. We know there are huge social benefits if women control more of how their money is used and invested. So what role does sex-disaggregated data play in business decisioning at World Remit?
Thank you for that question. That's really cool one. Before I jump into the answering it, yes, definitely women are the driving force in terms of contributing to especially the socio-economic side, to the family-based ecosystem, which is the foundation of any nation's economy. And we see that in the Philippines, in Malaysia, Indonesia, Bangladesh, and many others. So the information that we deploy and the types of data and the techniques that we use, inclusive of the SDD, the very much the data that we are talking about today, it facilitates various analysis, thought process, and eventually the decision that we make in terms of understand what kind of customization is needed. What we do in World Remit is different from, say, a banking institution, because remittance is a touch and go kind of services. It really depends on the need, and it really depends on the time of the month when the transaction happens. So we really need to understand the dynamics in terms of the cyclical, the seasonal, and the day of the month, and where is that location in terms of the behavior of whether the receive is needed or the send is needed. So there's a lot of dynamics, and the data points that we use is huge, because you know that remittance is driven largely by the rates of the FX that's playing on that day, as well as whether there's any special occasion that's happening or upcoming, and whatever else that we can think of in terms of making sure that the brand stickiness and awareness is there for them to think about us in terms of sending money. So in largely now, because we were among the first movers in terms of digitalizing remittance besides others, so we enjoy the first mover advantage, because World Remit has been established for 10. I mean, we're already in our 10 years and moving into our 11th year. So the thing is, it's a bit skewed when you said about women represent 48% of global migrants, because we don't look at just the overarching data of that 48%. we have to look at country by country, the nature of the migration, and the reason why they want to send money back home. So this very much drive how efficient our services is going to be, how cost effective it is needed, and also the features where they interact, because Remit is 100% digital platform. We do not have physical outlets, and we do not take cash. And one very, I want to proudly share this. One of the data that we often use and always use is to also detect what we call human trafficking, because we can see that. And we did actually work with the authorities around the world in terms of identifying suspicious transaction that's probably facilitated by criminals. And then this kind of data, especially the SDD type of data, is really useful for us to then alert, block that transaction, and then inform the proper regulators or the authority in terms of the kind of pattern and the kind of personnel that's actually involved in that kind of illicit and illegal activity. So this data is not just for commercial purposes. We also look after those kind of transaction and alert the authority, because the speed of the transaction, then we know that, and the ability to track the device that they're using and their geolocation. These actually help to, in many cases, apprehend and capture the perpetrator in terms of all these criminal activities. So it is, in summary, it's a huge influence to our organization direction, and data, especially SDD data, is constantly being the center of our focus in Remit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, specifically on that, I wanted to ask if you've ever considered adopting a gender differentiated algorithm to counter some biases. Now, we know that the charges paid by women tend to be higher, not because there's a discrimination within the charge itself, but given the specific process through which they go, because we know that women usually tend to have smaller amounts, but they transfer on a much more frequent basis. And so almost in many different countries, we've seen that women and men end up sending the same amount of transfer, but women are unfortunately charged much higher because they did so with a lot more transactions to reach the same volume as the men did. And so have you considered doing something about that to kind of take that into consideration in your algorithm? And have you considered integrating gender lens in different ways in your services?
Yeah, I really want to say that we really love our women customers, because more they transact, the more we give them reward, because in remittance, volume plays a very huge actually aspect in terms of making sure that more revenue is generated, because we don't make money from the remittance itself. It's all about the effects that we manage. So women, when they send more frequent, actually we reward them with more than men. If you like to know that most of our customers, the women actually get more reward because they are more frequent users. So to us, we welcome women more than men, to put it bluntly, because men used to come, let's say, once a month. Yes, they send big amount. To us, the amount is really not the key. It is one of the key factors, but frequency is definitely better, because the moment transaction happen, we definitely would look at the FX, and this is where the margin actually trickles in. So it's not so much on the value, the average transaction value. Yes, we do take that into account, but because of the frequency, that's why we definitely look at the SDD aspect. But by nature, we know that women will send more money. Evidently, those who are sending money back to the Philippines are women. And they did ask us in terms of, can we really control how our husband get the money. So they really do not want to send and make sure that the husband take cash, but they rather, they suggested to us this. They said, could we send money and make sure that this money is going to be spent at this supermarket and that supermarket, so that when they get the money, they would have to go to that supermarket and spend the money there rather than take the cash. So we said, yes, definitely we are working on that in making sure that the control or the empowerment is with the sender, which is fortunately for us, many of them are women, and making sure that they decide on how much and in what way and form that money is going to be received by the receiver. So this is very obvious for our Philippines payment rail, and many more are asking for the same thing. So that's the beauty of technology, because only it can be initiated by the type of data, but the technology itself can determine how actually certain segment and certain gender getting benefit out of it. That's what we do, and we think that we don't really need to have that because the women themselves are asking for us to do it. So the data will come definitely, but now we know for a fact that we definitely will have to do that if we want to have more women customer with us. Yeah.
So in a way, I guess it's perfect, right? They are really the best customers possible, women. Not only are they more profitable for you, but they're also exactly telling you how to fine tune your own services. So what better could you ask for? Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for that, Rizwan. Moving on to Preeti. I think it's Lakshmi, right? Am I saying it correct? Yeah,
yes.
Thank you. So, Preeti, you've played a major role throughout the development of Underwriting, as you mentioned. Itself one of the biggest wealth management companies in India, and with quite a few, I think, retail outfits. What led you to start Lakshmi? And in particular, what data points led you to the decision to target the women's market and the mass market, the mass market women's market for wealth management in particular?
Thank you, Carol, for that question. I think I have possibly spoken about this a million times, because every time somebody asks me, why do you have a platform just for women? There are enough platforms out there, right? And I think this does go back to my experience in Anandrati, where we reached out. Like I said, we are present all over the country. And when we reached out, we realized that women, even though they were earning their own money, they had control over their own money, they would not make financial decisions. And then, of course, I think invariably for financial services or wealth management firms, because the low-hanging fruit were always men, all the communication was meant for men out there. And I think this is true across the board, but particularly in India, I realized that women were being targeted. So women, the only financial product that is being sold to women is a credit product or a lending product, because when you lend to women, your NPAs are far, far lower, right? So for most financial institutions, that was that one part. So even if a male took a loan, they would insist on a woman to come on board and sort of sign that guarantee, right? So that was that one area. I think the only other space that financial services send out communication to women was creating fear, right? What if you lose your partner? What if your husband dies? So take some insurance, right? So these were the two places that women were really sent communication on. But nothing about investing your money or growing your money, taking charge of your money. Even online banking did not reach out to women. So I think there was this big gap. And for the life of me, I could not understand that. Why is it, a woman would understand that, okay, she, this is her financial goal. This is the amount of money she has. How does she grow that money? But even after understanding, she would go back and say, I'm going to ask my husband, I'm going to talk to my father and come back, whether I want to do this, right? So I think the big realization was that the way women interact with financial products is very different than men. The way they build trust is very different than men. And I think, if you, for example, put together a gamut of financial products, you will see that men will, even if it is smaller amounts, will experiment. I think women will take time. They will, engage with the service provider and then form trust. And trust on two parts. one is their own self-doubt, right? And this is a very strong social conditioning. I think this is a global phenomena. The gender gap exists when it comes to careers, to the workforce, etc. So it's no surprise that it follows through to even, the financial decisions, right? And therefore, I think two important aspects that were really missing was, one, communication from the financial services ecosystem to women. And the second was just the whole aspect of trust amongst women, trust on, removing that self-doubt that, yes, I can do it. And the second piece, yes, I can build trust on this service provider or this, financial product. And I think both of these, if financial services have to reach to sort of break these barriers, they would have to have a longer patience and a longer gestation period, which, as you mentioned, everybody is obviously profit driven. And you're saying, okay, why when there are so many men, right? I mean, in India today, even just very, very little, say about 8 to 9% of even the men, put their money into financial products like mutual funds and stocks. So that leaves women far behind, right? So I think these were the 2 points that really came home to me, that, I don't think the conventional or traditional financial services will be able to do justice. And in India, even if you see the digital platforms today, which provide for financial products, the very all-service financial boutique, financial fintechs, you will see the percentage of women is even less than 10% on those platforms. So it was not just a function of just it being a digital platform. It really meant that you had to customize it. You had to customize the platform, the communication, the interaction of financial products to women. And I think this is where Lakshmi was born. For me, I think it was important because I think I've watched far too many women, compromise with jobs, careers, personal relationships, because they were not managing their money. And I think it was driven by this insight, as well as, I think, coming from the passion that, yes, this is an underserved audience. And if we really need to look at an equal world, I think this audience needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Preeti. And I think it's great. I noted it down. We've seen far too many women compromise because they are not in charge of their money. I think that's a very correct and bold and spot on statement to put out there. You promised us some data, and so what metrics do you use to track your profitability? I mean, LTV to CAC, etc. And what does the data tell you about the business case for serving women?
So that's actually been very interesting, and that was an insight that I had even before I started Lakshmi. At the end of the day, I think we're all setting up business models, and I think that insight was very, very, it gave me a lot of confidence. So I think a couple of things that when you realize that the NPAs when you lend to women are lower, and on the other hand, I realized that even the sort of corpus they were building, or the asset under management, if a woman was really investing, was actually the average AUM was larger than that of a man, which essentially told me that the financial discipline, if adopted, is actually far better in women than it is for men. And I think for me, that was the confidence to really go ahead and say, okay, this is something that does make a lot of sense. I think the metrics we monitor are just like any other fintech. I have to be very candid that I have jumped from the conventional business to the startup mode and the fintech mode. So I'm learning as well. But yes, we are, the metrics that we do monitor is essentially the average AUM that a woman has, which means that is she sort of had she come to a place where she's saying, okay, I need to now put in, every month or every time I have some additional funds, I'm investing it. So that's our North Star metric, the average AUM per woman. But of course, our LTV, CAC to LTV ratio is something that we monitor very well. And I think that has been a great surprise. I think every time I speak to people, when I tell them that we're looking at some surprising numbers on LTV to CAC to LTV, and it may be far too early for me to really sort of say that this is something that will continue, but we're looking at some great numbers there, which just collaborate the fact that women, once they decide to, invest their money, there is no looking back. So yeah, those are, great numbers to sort of
Can we have
talk
a
about.
Can we have a sneak understanding of what that CAC to LTV ratio is like at Lakshmi?
Well, I've said this before, but I happy to share it. So right now we're looking at, a 1:13 ratio, which a lot of fintechs tell me is a bit, hard to believe. But also I have to be very.
Vidmar's eyes are very big right now.
No, but there is a disclaimer here that I think we are in early stages, and it may be far too early to sort of say that this is something that will happen. But I think my understanding from financial services and the way they function and the way women interact with products, I think has their, at the end of the day, I think when you're doing something, there has to be, beyond being just a service provider, you have to bring in innovation. How are you doing? What is it that you're really doing differently? So that, because one of the biggest, I think the sore points for financial services when it came to women was a high cost of acquisition, actually. And how do you break that, right? How do you reach out to women just beyond being a digital product and saying, okay, I'm there on your smartphone, why don't you just adopt me, right? I think we've looked at all of those models of paid acquisition, digital marketing, and I don't think that is something that works when it comes to women. I mean, it's not, it might, but it's not a very viable business proposition.
Okay, thank you. Amazing. And with that, I want to move to Sucharita. So Sucharita, 90% of Kaleidofin's customers are women. Yet, as far as we understand, it was not set up with women's market specifically in mind. So what does the data tell you about why so many customers are female, and what kind of sex disaggregated data are you using to build the business?
Yeah. So you are right. We didn't start out as a neobank that's exclusively focused on women. Our focus was on customers in the informal sector, and that's about 1 billion people in India. So it's not a small number at all. This is most of India today. And but what we realized as we started out with Kaleidofin, through a bunch of focus group discussions and in-depth interviews, was that given that our mission was about making customers' life goals happen, for example, most of our customers are very keen to see that their children go to a professional college so that they live better lives than themselves. That is a huge motivation. That's about 60% of our customers. We have about 1 million odd customers are really working towards the education of their children, and that's a very, very motivating goal. And just like Preeti said, I couldn't agree more that women actually are very motivated about their own goals as well as their household's goals. I would say in the focus group discussions that came out really clearly that the motivation levels are 10x, and if they can relate to a solution, if they can relate to it intuitively, the discipline is also much higher. So those were two hypotheses that came out from the focus group discussions, that this was sort of about motivation levels were about 10x. And therefore, if we were to go with a long-term financial planning savings solution, actually targeting women was the right thing to do from a business perspective. Also, in India and in many other parts of the world, but in India in particular, only 14% of women actually even own smartphones. So we actually started to think about how do we target women in every aspect of our business. So first of all, so one of our first, partners on the ground was Seva as an institution. And there we figured out that even the bank branch tellers, even they, sometimes didn't have smartphones. Even if they did, were very uncomfortable, only used it through voice, for example. And then how do you start to navigate a financial services app? It almost seems impossible to sell to that interface, to that demographic as well. And this is a vast demographic. So we actually started from the basics and we said that, look, assistance is required, outreach is required. So we are actually going to combine fintech with touch, and we're going to partner with agent networks throughout in order to provide that assistance to women at their doorstep. Again, I think Rizwan said that women are very time poor, right? And they can't generally afford to, leave their work locations or their homes for very long. A lot of people are also working out of home, even before the pandemic. There are small businesses and things like that that run out of home. So clearly, as well as home care responsibilities. So clearly that meant that service at the doorstep is something that women were actually willing to pay for, and has a lot of value because the opportunity cost is very high. So we invested in a full assisted app architecture. And we also invested in building up an agent network to reach out to women, because we thought that, that first hurdle is an important one. And then actually a lot of women come online, but that's something that we did. Secondly, we also made sure that the financial health assessment we were doing was tailored towards women. So for example, when we looked at household assets, we looked at things like not just smartphones and televisions, but also washing machines. Washing machine is a very clear indicator of I value my time, right? I don't want to wash clothes, with my time, and therefore we actually took into account assets like that in our wealth calculation, because most of our customers were working in the informal sector. Thirdly, what we also did was, in the app design, our app works in 9 languages. We integrated voice and video, because we know that typing does not come naturally, even in the local language. I mean, English is out of question, but even when you go to local language, typing is just not something that will work. So, we innovated to make sure that our app is available in a local language, and there's a local language helpline as well that's available. Sometimes you need to speak to someone, and I'm sure all of us have encountered that frustration that I really need to speak to someone, now, forget this app interface, I have a problem. So that I need to solve. So, and then we also, of course, made sure that we are not discriminating by using, for example, community or location or religion in any of our algorithms. I'm sure in many places, it's a big problem. In India, it's a big challenge. We are aware of it, especially when you're talking about the informal customer segment. There are these sort of biases that will just perpetuate themselves. So we made sure to pull, even though it is legal to collect the data, we made sure not to use those types of variables in the algorithms at all, so that they were non-discriminatory. And the other approach was we combined financial solutions, because what we saw didn't work at all was saying that, hey, one day I come to you and say, here's a mutual fund, and this fund is just right for you. Tomorrow I say, hey, you know what, you really need this life insurance as well. You really need this health insurance as well. You need a credit card also. Now, the thing is that when you encounter that kind of barrage of financial products, it just leads to distrust. So what we tried to do was combine financial products into a single solution and say that, hey, you know what you're buying is a portion of your children's education. And it might have 4 financial products, all encompassed, but it's much more intuitive for the customer. So those are the few. We actually incorporated it into every aspect of our business, not just data. And it has, yielded very good, strong results. We are not playing in the traditional Fintech customer segment at all. We chose not to because, simply speaking, because we're excited about serving this customer segment.
Thank you, Sucharita. And I think it's spot on with exactly what Dietmar was saying in the beginning, right? Understanding your clients, those focus groups, and really then when you're building, taking into consideration their requirements, really helps you put in the right products and the right services out there, which in turn will actually give you as pure and clean as the data can get in terms of really the decisions you want to base on eventually. Just one more quick question, and then please to the public, start putting your questions in the chat. After I ask a second question to Sucharita, I'm going to open it for your questions. Why did you decide to build the credit scoring into your underwriting, Sucharita? And was there any gender bias in the data that you had to correct for?
So we started with credit scoring because, frankly speaking, because of our strength in financial health assessment. We realized that the financial health assessment and credit health assessment are actually two sides of the same coin. It is the same customer, it is the same surplus that either goes into savings or to repay a borrowing, or both. Most customers actually save and borrow at the same time. So it was primarily to leverage our strengths, and actually when the pandemic started about a year and a half ago, we realized that our customers really needed emergency liquidity lines, and a lot of customers had no money to save at all. Vast majority of our customers. So we thought that was one of the best things we could do for our customers, to actually launch a credit product. For that, we needed a credit health score, and we started partnering with many institutions. We partnered with about 7 grassroots level lending institutions, community non-banks largely, to provide them those credit health assessment services so they could quickly provide emergency credit lines. Yes, I think we do make sure that in the modeling process, any factors that you're born with are not incorporated into the model. But to, and I saw one of the questions on the chat as well, there are many other markers. You don't have to say that I'm a woman in order for the machine to find out that I'm a woman, right? Because it will show through my purchases and so many other data points, right? I'm wearing pink. So I know I'm being specious, but so it's really hard. I think it's a hard problem to prevent discrimination. It's not easy. We're actually working with a couple of academicians to say that, look, why don't you look at our data? Why don't you look at who did we lend to, at what rates, through our partners? And I can tell you it's not an easy question to solve. So we haven't solved it. I cannot say today that, yes, it is a completely non-discriminatory algorithm, because many other markers exist, even if you don't put these variables. So that's where we are. It's work in progress. But I think we are making an effort to go in the right direction.
Okay, and then so I just want to build on that because I want to still ask Daniela's question. So Daniela from MasterCard is asking, so do you collect and analyze data like the religion, community, and variables in order to confirm that your algorithm is not being discriminatory, because you are still collecting but simply not applying it within your algorithm? And how can you confirm that your algorithm is not biased if you're not checking for these data points?
Yeah. No, that's actually exactly what I was saying a little while ago, that yes, we do have access to this data. So we can use that data to actually confirm whether we are being biased or not. So I think because, for example, there are other markers of gender, caste, religion, community that exist in other types of data that are available and used for credit modeling. I do think that it is a hard problem. We are in the process, I would say, of ensuring that our algorithms are not biased. I don't think we are there yet. We are still sort of wading through it. What we can say is we did not, we consciously chose not to include discriminatory variables in the model itself. But the confirmation that the algorithm is not indeed discriminatory takes time. And we are working with actually 2 to 3 researchers to come to that conclusion. But it's work in progress.
Thank you, Sucharita.
Just
yes.
to add to Sucharita's point, I think the problem is, Sucharita, if I'm not wrong, we're also, some of this data is actually part of KYC. There is no choice. The regulatory environment asks you to collect that data. So you would have that data. I think it's more, it's more collection due to the regulatory environment asking you to collect that data.
Correct.
Because Preeti, you opened up a very key, you brought up a very key subject. Before I move on with the participants' questions, I want to ask a question, because regulation is a very key component in this. And with some of the fintechs we're talking to have said that, especially in the US, that they don't track the sex of their customers because of regulatory restrictions. So are there, in your markets, I mean, all 4 of you, such restrictions that limit your ability to capture the sex of your customers and analyze the data? Because this is a big challenge as well for this market. Maybe Dietmar, we start with you.
Yeah, so in South Africa, it's obviously a very sensitive topic, and so it's not regulated that you can't collect it, but you absolutely cannot use it for discriminatory purposes. So you cannot use it in your decision making. But because of that, a lot of people are nervous to just capture it from the beginning, because then people are asking, why are you capturing? What are you doing with it? And that in itself then leads to people not necessarily looking at through that lens. So that is also one thing that we've sort of discussed internally, is that sometimes this regulation, so absolutely it's there, it's got good intentions, but sometimes the 3rd or 2nd or 4th order effects of that sort of tend to have a secondary effect that's not not intended from the regulation, which is definitely happening in South Africa, because people are just very nervous to look at that data, because people would think that you are using it for discriminatory purposes.
And Rizwan, what about you?
Yeah. If I may add, I just to share where I'm coming from. I used to be a financial regulator for about 12 years. So there's also a concern on the what we call this regulatory what you call arbitration, or there's a gap in terms of one regulation over the other. So for example, if you're looking at it from anti-money laundering perspective compared to personal data protection, as well as looking at it from a credit rating agencies law, for example. So these 3 actually have their own needs in terms of how they collect data and the kind of data that they collect. But in the financial services ecosystem, the anti-money laundering and the KYC requirement will actually supersede the other regulation, which include the personal data as well as other types of regulation that require or allow you to collect data. And sometimes, and in most cases, the anti-money laundering requirement actually collect all sort of data that inevitably would give you the opportunity to be a little bit more skewed toward how you use the data. So it boils down back to the institution and the people who lead those institutions to be ethical about using it, and be very, very conscious about the sensitivity of using those data. I understand that regulators can check and then catch all those illegal activities, but that's always post the event, and it already has happened. The biasness or whatever unfairness has already happened. So these are the very difficult situation and dynamics that needs to be looked at in terms of how we make sure that data is protected. And as like what Sucharita said, it's very hard to actually make sure that this is not happening. And we try our own very best in terms of making sure that we are not biased. And in World Remit, we also try to even understand how does the focus group actually ask the question. Is it a question about who is doing what from a third-party perspective? Or we ask directly to what do you do, which is a first-hand information that you get when the respondent actually answers that question. And that will lead to the kind of data that you're going to get. And it is very important for us to understand that the SDD data, it's not about asking whether is what's lacking between men and women. But what we are trying to understand is the whole picture about what men will get and what will benefit men and what will benefit women. So to us, that's SDD in terms of understanding the benefit that both will get, not trying to say the other one will get better than the other side. So that's what we are trying to do in World Remit so that everybody will equally get what they deserve based on the data that's.
Thank you, Rizwan. Thank you. I have a lot of questions coming in. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and answer all of them in very short, straight to the point. So I'm going to ask each question to one person. Sorry about that. So Susan is saying data is key. How can we show the value of sex-disaggregated data more widely and encourage more companies to collect data and analyze it? Preeti, why don't you give us your sense on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and I think this sort of links to the previous point as well. I mean, for Lakshmi, what I'm guilty of saying we're completely biased, right? We are making sure that we have only women on the platform. So we do use a lot of tools to say, because the core of the community is, the core of the product is a community, which is a safe space for women to talk about. So we completely use that tool to say that, no, we're not welcoming men. So, that's sort of, I think, completely not in sync with a lot what the other panelists have said. But I think it is one of the things that is changing, and I think a lot of the companies are doing it, is understanding behavioral differences or collecting that data, because I think now it is being recognized that women, whether it is in the workforce or as a customer, are bringing more and more value. So I think when, the FMCG companies, for example, for years have done it, right? But I think what is changing is today, every service where women are being left behind, I think companies are using tools. For example, even in my parent company, Underwriting, I think we do sort of understand that, for certain roles, why do women prefer certain roles over others? And when you sort of draw those conclusions that they prefer it because, for example, it gives them flexibility of working hours, or it ties in with what their personal goals in life are, I think that is really, really helpful. And I think that is something that companies surely can bring to the table. And I think a lot of them are doing it. I mean, ESG is a big word today. And I think just almost every company wants to score on that. And I think everybody wants to get, a part of the S is, and even the governance, I think is for example, to get more women on board.
Thank you. So Charita, very quickly, have you had to make any adjustments to the communication of financial health information for women across the board?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say that the focus group discussion or the in-depth interview itself is a great way to adjust the way you're collecting information. So, for example, I remember we started off in the city of Ahmedabad. It's a very sort of vibrant trading city in India. And there we figured out that most women, in that state were actually working. And they were not only working, they were doing 3 to 4 jobs, almost all of them. All part-time, very busy day, and at least 2 jobs. So the thing is that, for example, even getting to grips with where does a woman work and how does she earn money, for example. That question, if you just ask it simply, you will miss a lot of the information and the color. But from the focus group discussion, we could tell that, okay, you know what, the way we're asking questions, we will not get the right answers. We will get bad data, which will lead to bad decisions. And, that's just one small, example. The other, big one we stumbled into, and this is actually across India, was the importance of confidentiality of financial transactions. So a lot of women were very nervous about their spouses, their male relatives, for want of a better word, that they will find out that I'm saving money, and actually wanted to keep it completely confidential. So very often, so what we activated in our app was, this is my friend's number, who you can call. And that friend might be, your next door neighbor. But people really like that because nobody, often, the woman has a feature phone and the husband has a smartphone. And it's out of question to use the husband's smartphone because the need for confidentiality, even from the family, is so high. So those are sort of a few ways in which we sort of tweaked our product proposition. So
thank you, Sucharita. Great.
Sorry,
There's a question. Yes. So 20 seconds, please, Preeti.
Two things. Just, I think, adding financial goals and making it simple. I think these two things have really worked when we've reached out to women as communication. Just adding financial goals, and this is simple to do, I think has been very effective. Perfect.
Thank you. There's a question here from Sana that I think is really interesting. Is sex-disaggregated data being used to support only the business growth or also to deepen and incentivize the impact case? And I'd like to hear the guys on this. Who wants to start? Dietmar?
So for us, it's really, because we still early stages, so it's really just to understand our offering. Does it resonate with the market, and does it resonate across the population? Because we're obviously trying to serve the full market. We want to make sure that all the features and functions that we have appeals broadly. And we can definitely see the usage and the behavior across the platform varies very, very differently. So for us, it's really just to make sure that we round up our offering, which obviously ultimately informs how successful we'll be. But we use that data to really analyze the behaviors and make sure that all the features we have and that we have got enough of an offering and a rounded offering that it addresses all pockets of the market. And gender is one of them, but we also look at age. Young people versus old people also transact very, very differently across the platform. So there's multiple dimensions across which we
Thank you, Dietmar. Rizwan, in 20 seconds, if you could give your opinion on that, and I have to close.
Not just business, as I mentioned, we also help to prevent crime and definitely help bridging families from one country to another, because that's what we do in terms of helping those who are in need, especially the migrant. Definitely not just for business.
Great. Thank you very much, Rizwan. It's been an amazing session. I personally have at least 10 more questions I would love to ask you guys, but I think time, unfortunately, that is not fair with us. It has been an absolutely amazing pleasure hosting all four of you. Very insightful. I would like to thank all of the participants as well for all their questions. I'm sure they had many, many more. Just a quick note, my colleague Karim just mentioned a hackathon link. So we're launching a hackathon about unlocking the full power of the female economy. And I'd love for everyone here, participants as well as speakers, whether you're interested or fintechs within your ecosystem who would be interested, please do share the word. The link is in the chat. I would like to thank each and every single one of you for the lovely discussion. Very insightful, very interesting. Thank you all. I wish you all a great day. Just a quick note, our next Fintech Friday session is in July, so keep checking your emails. The details will be shared soon. Thank you all and have an amazing afternoon or day or morning or evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And the recording, just to be sure, just to say, the recording will be on YouTube, if not today, by tomorrow, the latest, in a playlist called Fintech Fridays. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Great to get to know all of you.
Thank you. Likewise.
Mhm.